which we all agree is dangerous, has a half-life of 24,000 years. And once again, I'll give Broomfield City Council that they were working every step of the way on this to get and have the monitoring. And I think you still work with the DOE to make sure that the monitoring is appropriate. And that was in the memo as well. The monitoring remains an issue. I'm going to make a couple other comments here that there were a couple websites for those that are interested that was given to me, and I looked at them yesterday. They're still active websites for those who want to write it down. And you can get all the documents and all the regulations. You can get quarterly reports, and there are current quarterly reports that I could see yesterday. And so the government is attempted to be as transparent as they possibly can, in doing the cleanup. So, okay, approximately 4,900 acres remains, were transferred to the U.S. Department of the Interior Fish and Wildlife Service in 2007 to be protected as the Rocky Flats National Wildlife Refuge. And I was going to put a point of interest, and I'll take a little side story that Ken Salazar, who was the senator from Colorado and who was the attorney general, and he was always big on Chris was ended up with the Rocky Mountain backdrop, and so it was interesting that he then ended up being as the head of the Department of Interior when all this stuff gets transferred over, because he wanted to protect the backdrop, in the Front Range strongly. And I met him several times when he was a senator on those issues. Another just interesting comment: when I campaigned for mayor in 2007, Mark Udall was running for Senate, and so Jared Polis and Will Shafroff showed up about half my campaign events. I mean, because there was a year before they were running, and I got to know Will Shafroff fairly well. And so then when he had been the head of the lottery people, the
Great Outdoors Colorado.
Great Outdoors Colorado, and which was his. But Will Shafroff ended up at as the head of Fish and Wildlife, and so we went out and met with him a couple times. It was on the Jefferson Parkway right away, and which is also something I like doing, controversial stuff, and so there was a fair amount of controversy, remains to stay on it. So, and I wanted to touch base because I said my presentation is going to take a tremendous amount of time. So then I went into, because it's something I had become aware of when I was mayor, is that it was a big deal for Salazar, it was a big deal for Governor Hickenlooper to connect. And probably everybody knows that we have two refuges: the Rocky Flats, one of the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. There's also a wildlife refuge. I had never heard of it, until I heard a presentation from Hickenlooper and Salazar about two ponds, which is in Arvada. And so it was Secretary Salazar's goal and Governor Hickenlooper's goal to connect those three national refuges through a series of trails. And once again, Chris, please, if I'm saying anything wrong, let me, and the Rocky Mountain Greenway project is a project that that's been planned for years, which is connecting the three together. In 2016, council agreed to provide up to $105,000 in funding. I think the actual request was less than $100,000. And council did put that, in my understanding, is a lot of the local government's agreement was that there be additional sampling. And I did not drill down on how much work what that means. I remember talking to Shirley at one time about the sampling that occurred out there. It's pretty, our staff is very knowledgeable at it. But I think part of the attitude, if you're going to have trails out there, you're going to have access to this site that had these things happen at it. I think doing additional sampling is probably fairly prudent. And well, that's the end of my presentation, because I didn't want to go into details on anything. I wanted to get the dialogue going. I don't know, people. I assume there might be some questions that I may or may not be able to answer. I think there's other people. But I wanted to get, I wanted at a very high level to get the discussion out there, because as I said earlier, when I talked about doing the presentation, it creates emotions among people, because Rocky Flats was so controversial, and and once again we have a gentleman here that was with the FBI, and so comments that people want to make, questions. Please.
I'm a transplant from the Midwest 5 years ago. Had heard of Rocky Flats, but not a whole lot. And I'm just wondering, prior to the FBI raid in '89, was there any idea that this stuff was dangerous? I mean, was it-
Yes, I mean, I think it's safe to say, I grew up in Westminster and, you know, like I said, had relatives that worked at the plant. That's why I named it collateral damage, because the answer is that there were fires out there. I think it was, people knew that there were, you know, that there probably was some releases. So Rocky Flats has been controversial since I could read, and so the answer is yes. So, any other questions or comments?
Well, there was an agreement with the papers, Rocky Mountain News and Denver Post, back in the early 50s. You don't mention us and no pictures of flyovers. If anything happens, we'll tell you. And I hired in '57, and I was hired by Dow Chemical. And the first thing I had to find out was, where the hell is Rocky Flats? And nobody was really aware. There was one little dirt road in, and it was like Area 51. Nobody knew anything about it.
Yeah, very secretive, right? I mean, it was pretty much a secret project.
Yes.
Except for the people that worked there, and even they didn't know what they were working on, some of them.
Partly true. If you were hired in, you had a specific job in a specific building, and I didn't know what happened in your building, and you didn't know what happened in my building. And they eventually did away with that when they found out that the maintenance people that were working here and working there
Talk to
were the
everybody.
ones that knew what was happening.
What's the status of the Jefferson Parkway? Is that by?
No. You know, and once again, I'm not an expert, but you know, my understanding, and I'll give my source for information, is Greg Stokes, who's the chairman of well, first let's start, the Northwest Parkway changed hands. It got acquired recently, and there's some momentum right now with the Jefferson Parkway that it's not dead, and they're still trying to get financing, so.
I'm a transplant. Can you put this place on a map with some of the existing roads and developments?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. I'll try to, well, once again, so you know the Boulder Turnpike, and then have you ever been on Highway 128 or Highway 93? So if you go to Interlochen, and you know, so here's Broomfield, you have Interlochen on the other side, you know, we're showing Superior here, and then you have Highway 128, and it goes into, there's Indiana, you know, it's between Indiana and Highway 93, basically above 72nd and below Highway 128.
Below.
Do you know where the wind farm is? All
Yeah.
the big windmills? Rocky Flats is a mile south.
You know where the police department is, it's outside the police department.
Well, yeah, it's by the jail.
By the jail.
Wow. No, what we call it, the detention facility, right? But to be distinguished from Ellie's Pond, right? You know, when they first built down there, by Ellie's Pond, they called it a detention facility, and there were all sorts of calls to the Parks and Recreation Group because they thought they were going to put the jail down on 10th Avenue. So they're trying to be funny. So,
Mr. Quinn,
Mr. Wilkie.
I was curious as to the current status of some of the deposits that were buried. My understanding was that there were places within within Rocky Flats where there was radioactive material buried or contaminated material, and that those sites are being monitored now,
Yes.
and that the groundwater below those sites has been contaminated and might be moving towards Stanley Lake. Is there any truth to that?
No, well, certainly, as part of the cleanup, there was a lot of residual contamination that was left on site.
Within the central operating unit.
Within the central operable unit, and so, as part of the cleanup, there was a series of surface water monitoring sites and also groundwater monitoring sites that were established. And based on the geology out there, the thought is that any groundwater that's on that high plateau would emerge as surface water and would be detected at the surface water monitoring sites before it would flow into Stanley Lake. Now, one thing to add on to that is, as Mr. Quinn had mentioned, there was the $100 million for water protection. Part of that was to replace Broomfield's drinking water supply. There was another $25 million that was used to construct what's called the Woman Creek Reservoir. And that's shown here on the lower kind of right-hand corner. It's just a little bit to the right.
Right there.
And that's where the surface water drainage from the site goes into, and then that facility is intended to essentially protect Stanley Lake from contamination. And any water that is captured there is pumped up and released back into Walnut Creek, which is just downstream of Great Western Reservoir.
So the creek is contaminated, Brook Creek?
No.
It's monitored.
Well, it's not contaminated based on what they're monitoring today.
Oh, okay.
So let's be clear about it. So they have a certain list of constituents that they're monitoring for to maintain that things aren't leaving the site. And they have had hits of plutonium, particularly on one of the water monitoring sites that's kind of on the southeast part of the central operable unit, but it hasn't reached as far down as the edge of the actual edge of the central operable unit.
And how often do they monitor?
Well, and that's kind of a controversial thing. They do what they call flow-based monitoring, so they'll collect samples based on the flow rates, kind of a proportionate amount of flow. One of the issues that we have as a local community, though, is that if we go into a long periods of dry spell where we don't have flow in the creeks, DOE has been known to throw out those samples and not test them because they don't have full bottles of water.
Thank you.
We hear we have one minute.
What happens when you have a massive flood, as we did in 2013, when surface water and groundwater may interact?
Well, one of the things that happened, particularly on the Stanley Lake side, is the Woman Creek Reservoir filled up. I don't know if you remember the 2013 flood. That's the only time I've ever seen that reservoir full of water. And then that water was pumped out and released in Walnut Creek. Broomfield has what's called a diversion channel around the Great Western Reservoir. And so any runoff that comes off of there flows around the reservoir and then into Walnut Creek and then continues downstream. And based on the flows that we saw, there were probably some additional flows that would have flown into Great Western Reservoir. But we tested that water afterwards, and we also tested the channel, the bypass channel, to see if we saw any contaminants.
After the flood.
After the flood, we didn't see anything. But that's not to say things could have moved during the floods.
Okay, I'll get you next, I'll get Kurt.
Where are the trails supposed to go? Do they start in Boulder? Are they heading over to Two
Chris,
Ponds
do you
this
wanna
way?
answer that?
I'm assuming they're going around the red spot up there, but I hope they're going around the red spot. But where are the trails supposed to go?
So there was a comprehensive conservation plan that was approved in 2005, and that was a planning effort done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they involved Boulder County, City of Boulder, Broomfield, Arvada, Westminster, Jefferson County, a lot of different governments surrounding the site. And that plan laid out a conceptual alignment for trails. Since that time, over the past few years here, we've been working as a group of communities to try to get agreement on where the trail should access into the refuge. the communities can't necessarily control where the Fish and Wildlife Service puts the trails in the community, but they have definitely been a partner in our discussions. And so they've been a part of this process, which has been really positive. But in general, where we are right now is we're looking at some kind of crossing. Here is the Broomfield boundary right here, goes up to State Highway 128. Do you have that little, does it have a little pointer on it?
I don't know, I
Light?
would use that.
I'm not sure if it does or not. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, yay. Technology, magic. So here's the very southeast corner of the refuge, and this is Indiana. Goes all the way up here. This is State Highway 128, as Pat was saying, and McCaslin Boulevard is right here. So this is Great Western Reservoir, and here's our boundary. Westminster is down in this area. So we have been working together on where should the access be in this area. And Broomfield was promoting the idea of accessing up in this area and coming over to the multi-purpose building that is proposed in this general area. And